The invitation that changed everything. Rain was falling gently over Los Angeles that evening, painting the streets with silver reflections and soft whispers of nostalgia. Keanu Reeves sat quietly by the window of his modest home, watching the droplets slide down the glass. To the world, he was a beloved actor, a man known for his humility and kindness despite his fame. But inside, he often felt like a solitary soul walking through life's endless corridor, searching for moments that truly mattered. He had just returned from a long day on set, exhausted but thoughtful. The phone on his table buzzed softly, pulling him out of his wandering thoughts. He picked it up absent-mindedly, expecting another business message or a reminder from his manager. But the sender's name made his heart pause for a second. It was Sandra Bullock. It had been years since they had last spoken beyond polite public greetings. They had shared the screen decades ago, shared laughs, dreams, and a rare kind of friendship that felt timeless. Life, however, had taken them on different paths. Careers, relationships, heartbreaks, and silence had slowly stretched the distance between them. The message was simple. Hey Keanu, I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner this Friday. It's been too long. For a moment, he just stared at the words. They felt like an unexpected knock on a locked door inside him. Why now? Why after so many years? Curiosity, warmth, and a touch of nervousness stirred within him. He typed a reply, paused, deleted it, and typed again before finally hitting send. I'd love to. Friday evening arrived faster than he had expected. Keanu stood in front of Sandra's house, a modest yet elegant place tucked away behind tall trees and ivy-covered walls. He held a small bouquet of lilies, not because he thought she needed flowers, but because he remembered they were her favorite. When she opened the door, it felt like time had folded back. Her smile was as bright as he remembered, her presence as comforting as an old song. They hugged, a genuine, heartfelt embrace that spoke more than words ever could. You look the same, she teased lightly, pulling back to look at him. Maybe even better, and you haven't changed at all, he replied with a small smile. Still radiant as ever, they walked inside, and the evening unfolded with easy laughter and warm memories. They spoke about the past, their first film together, the nervousness of youth, the fame that came too quickly, and the dreams that had shifted over time. But beneath the cheerful conversations, there was a quiet undercurrent, an unspoken tension, a sense that something deeper lingered beneath Sandra's invitation. As they moved to the dinner table, the atmosphere grew more intimate. The candles flickered softly, and the gentle music in the background made the silence between their words feel heavier. Sandra looked at him thoughtfully, her smile fading into something more serious. Keanu, she began, her voice almost trembling. There's another reason I asked you to come tonight. He looked up, his heart slowing as her tone shifted. What is it? She took a deep breath. I need your help, and I need your honesty. He set his fork down gently. Anything? You know that. Someone from our past is in trouble, she said quietly, and I think only you can reach him. Keanu frowned slightly, confusion clouding his mind. Who? Dylan, she whispered. Do you remember him? He did. Dylan Parker, a young assistant they had both worked with on one of their earliest films. Bright, ambitious, full of dreams. But life had not been kind to him. He had vanished from Hollywood after a scandal, and no one had heard much about him since. Keanu hadn't thought about him in years. What happened? Keanu asked. Sandra, single quotes, eyes softened with sorrow. He's homeless now, living on the streets downtown. I found out last month. I've tried talking to him, but he won't let me help. He's angry, bitter. He's lost faith in everyone. But when I mentioned your name, he listened, just for a moment. Keanu's chest tightened. This was not the evening he had expected, but something deep inside him stirred, that quiet sense of duty and compassion that had guided his life for so long. Then I'll talk to him, he said gently. We'll find a way to help. Sandra reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I knew you'd say that. The night stretched on as they talked, not just about Dylan, but about life, loss, and the strange loneliness that often came with fame. Keanu shared stories he had never spoken aloud before, the grief of losing loved ones, the emptiness that success could never fill, the small acts of kindness that had once saved him from his own darkness. Sandra listened in silence, her eyes glistening. You've always carried so much, haven't you? She whispered. We all do, he said softly. Some of us are just better at hiding it. There was a moment, a fragile, wordless moment, where they simply looked at each other. To people who had walked different roads, it somehow ended up at the same intersection again. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was something deeper. A rediscovery of trust, of connection. And beneath it all, a storm was quietly gathering. One that neither of them could see coming. 2 days later, Keanu found himself walking through the cold streets of downtown Los Angeles. The air smelled of rain and asphalt, and the neon signs flickered against the damp night sky. He held a small paper bag of food in his hands, a gesture of hope more than anything else. He found Dylan near a worn-out corner by a closed bookstore, wrapped in a tattered coat, staring blankly at the ground. His beard was unkempt, his eyes hollow with years of disappointment. When Keanu approached, Dylan looked up with a mix of shock and disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Dylan muttered, "Looking for an old friend." Keanu said calmly, holding out the bag, "I brought dinner." Dylan scoffed, but didn't turn away. He accepted the food reluctantly, his pride fighting his hunger. They sat on the cold pavement, sharing silence more than words. "You shouldn't be here," Dylan said bitterly. "People like you don't belong in places like this." "People like me?" Keanu repeated gently. "I'm just a man, same as you." Dylan laughed hollowly. "No, you're the guy who made it, the guy who gets applause. I'm the one they forgot." "Maybe," Keanu said softly, "but being forgotten isn't the same as being gone, and it's never too late to come back." Dylan stared at him, his expression cracking for just a moment, a flicker of the young man they had once known. "Why do you care?" "Because someone once cared enough to pull me back," Keanu replied. "And because Sandra still believes in you." The name made Dylan's jaw tighten. "She shouldn't." "Maybe not," Keanu said, standing slowly. "But she does, and so do I." As Keanu walked away that night, he knew this was only the beginning. Something had shifted, not just for Dylan, but for all of them. What started as a simple dinner invitation was now spiraling into something far greater, something that would test their strength, their compassion, and their courage in ways none of them could have imagined. And somewhere deep in his heart, Keanu felt it. This was going to change all their lives forever. The choice that changed everything. The morning after his meeting with Dylan, Keanu couldn't shake the image from his mind. The broken man sitting in the rain, the bitterness in his voice, the way hope had flickered for just a second before vanishing, it all stayed with him. He knew one conversation wasn't enough. Saving someone from the edge of despair wasn't about grand gestures. It was about patience, persistence, and showing up even when they pushed you away. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stared at the sunrise spilling golden light through his window. Most people saw him as someone who had it all: success, wealth, fame, but they didn't see the quiet mornings like this. When he questioned if he was truly doing enough with his life, maybe this was his chance to do something that mattered beyond the screen. His phone buzzed. A message from Sandra. "Did you see him?" "Yes." He typed back. "He's in a dark place, but he's still in there. I knew you'd reach him." "Thank you." Keanu paused before replying again. "This isn't over. I'm going back." 3 days later, he returned to the same street corner. This time, he brought 2 cups of hot coffee and a folded blanket. Dylan was there again, sitting in the same spot, staring into nothing. When Keanu approached, Dylan groaned softly. "You again." He muttered, "Me again." Keanu said with a small smile, sitting beside him. He offered the coffee. Dylan hesitated, then accepted it. For a while, they just sat there, sipping in silence. People walked by, some glancing, most ignoring. The world moved as if neither of them existed. "Why are you doing this?" Dylan asked finally, his voice raw. "I don't want saving." "Maybe not," Keanu replied, "but maybe you want someone to believe you're still worth saving." Dylan let out a bitter laugh. "Worth saving? I ruined everything. My career, my relationships, my life. You don't know what that's like." Keanu looked down at his hands. "I do." Dylan turned to him sharply. "Don't lie." "I'm not," Keanu said softly. "I've lost people I loved. I've watched dreams fall apart. I've questioned if my life had meaning. You're not the only one who's fallen." Dylan stared at him, stunned by the honesty. For the first time, his anger softened into something else: curiosity, maybe even trust. "Then how did you stand back up?" he asked quietly. "Someone reached out their hand," Keanu answered, "and I chose to take it." In the following weeks, Keanu kept showing up, sometimes with food, sometimes with stories, sometimes with nothing but silence. Slowly, the conversations grew longer. Dylan began to talk about the betrayal that had ended his career, about the shame that followed, about the people who had turned their backs on him. He spoke of mistakes, regrets, and nights he wished he wouldn't wake up. And Keanu listened. He never judged, never offered empty advice. He simply listened, and in doing so, he gave Dylan something he hadn't felt in years: dignity. One afternoon, Sandra joined them. She approached cautiously, unsure how she would be received. When Dylan saw her, his body tensed. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cold. "I came to see you," she said gently. "To say I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not noticing sooner. For not being there when you needed help. For letting you believe you were alone." Dylan looked away. "It doesn't matter." "It does," Sandra insisted. "Because you're still here. And because I still care." There was a long silence before Dylan finally whispered, "I don't know how to be anyone anymore. Start by being yourself," Keanu said quietly. "The rest will follow." Over time, something miraculous began to happen. Dylan started accepting small offers: a shower at his shelter, a haircut, a new pair of clothes. One day, he even agreed to meet a counselor that Sandra had arranged. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, days when he disappeared again, nights when the weight of the past dragged him back down. But each time, Keanu and Sandra were there, waiting patiently. One rainy afternoon, as they sat under the awning of a small cafe, Dylan spoke words Keanu had never expected to hear. "I want to try again," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know how, but I want to." Keanu smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. "That's all you need to know right now. The how comes later." But as much as this felt like progress, both Keanu and Sandra knew the journey was far from over. Dylan's life wasn't the only thing that would be tested. Their own lives, their values, their patience, their strength would soon face trials none of them could predict. One evening, as Keanu returned home from another visit, he found a letter waiting for him on his doorstep. It was handwritten, the ink slightly smudged. There was no return address, but the message inside made his heart stop. "Stay away from him. He's not who you think he is. And if you keep getting involved, you'll regret it." Keanu read the words twice, his mind racing. Who would send such a message? And why? Was it a threat? A warning? Or something far more dangerous? He didn't tell Sandra right away. Part of him didn't want to worry her. Part of him didn't want to believe that helping someone could put them in danger. But deep down, he knew this was a sign. Something from Dylan's past was about to resurface. And when it did, it could destroy everything they had been working for. The next time he met Dylan, Keanu decided to test the waters. "Has anyone been bothering you lately?" he asked casually. Dylan's single quotes as face darkened almost instantly. "Why do you ask?" "Just a feeling." Dylan hesitated, then sighed. "There are people I owe. People who haven't forgotten. They think I know things. They think I can give them something." "What kind of people?" Keanu asked, his tone steady. "The kind you don't want to cross," Dylan said quietly. "And if they know you're helping me, they won't stop with threats." For the first time, Keanu felt a chill of real fear. This wasn't just about redemption anymore. It was about danger, the kind that could destroy lives. But as he looked at Dylan, trembling with shame and fear, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to walk away. That night, Keanu met Sandra again at her home. The moment he told her about the letter and Dylan's admission, her face went pale. "We should go to the police," she said immediately. "Maybe," Keanu replied. "What if we do? Dylan might shut down again. He's just starting to trust us. So what's your plan?" "I'm going to talk to them," he said calmly. "Keanu, that's insane," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But I do know this. If someone's trying to scare me away, then we're closer to the truth than we think." Sandra stared at him, her heart torn between fear and admiration. "You always do this," she whispered. "You always walk into the fire if it means saving someone else. Someone once did the same for me," he said quietly, "and I can't forget that." As the night deepened, Keanu stood by the window, staring out at the dark city. Somewhere out there, people with dangerous intentions were watching. Somewhere out there, the past was stirring, ready to crash into the present. But he was ready to. This had started as a simple dinner. Now it was becoming something far bigger, a story of second chances, hidden secrets, and the unshakable belief that kindness could change even the darkest hearts. But before the storm was over, someone's life would be changed forever. And none of them, not Keanu, not Sandra, not Dylan, would emerge the same. The secret buried in the past city felt different that week, heavier, quieter, as if something dangerous was lurking beneath the surface. Keanu Reeves could feel it in his bones. The letter, the threats, the tension in Dylan's voice, everything was pointing to something bigger, something none of them had fully understood yet. He spent hours walking the streets, thinking about his next move. Fame had given him many things, but in moments like this, it also made him vulnerable. People knew his face, his name. Getting involved with dangerous people wasn't just a risk. It was an invitation for them to come after everything he cared about. But he couldn't abandon Dylan now. He had already stepped into the fire. Stepping back wasn't an option. He decided to start with the one person who knew more than she was letting on, Dylan himself. They met again in the same quiet cafe where they had shared coffee weeks earlier. Dylan looked more restless than usual, glancing at the door every few seconds as if expecting someone to burst in. "You're jumpy," Keanu said softly, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. "You'd be too if you knew what I know," Dylan muttered. "Then tell me," Keanu replied gently. "Tell me what's really going on." Dylan hesitated for a long time. His hands shook slightly as he wrapped them around the warm cup. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and tense. 10 years ago, before everything fell apart, I was working as an assistant for a production company. We were shooting a film, big budget, powerful investors, a lot of pressure. But behind the scenes, there were things happening that no one was supposed to know about. Illegal money, fake contracts, stolen assets, and I found out. Keanu's heart slowed. "And you exposed it?" "I tried," Dylan said bitterly. "I went to a lawyer. I was going to testify. But before I could, they destroyed my name. They leaked lies to the press, framed me for theft, and made sure no one would ever hire me again. By the time I realized how deep it went, it was too late. And these people," Keanu said carefully, "they're still around?" "Some of them," Dylan nodded. "And they still think I have proof. But I don't. I destroyed everything to protect myself. But they don't believe me." Keanu leaned back, trying to process the weight of what he was hearing. This wasn't just about redemption anymore. Dylan was tangled in something dangerous, something that could destroy lives if it ever came to light. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Keanu asked. "Because they're part of it," Dylan whispered. "Not all of them, but enough. And if they know I'm talking, they'll come after anyone close to me, including you." Keanu left the cafe that day with a storm raging inside his chest. Part of him wanted to walk away. This was bigger than anything he had expected. But another part, the part that believed in justice and compassion, knew he couldn't. Dylan had been alone for too long. Now that he had someone willing to stand by him, he couldn't be left behind again. That night, he met Sandra at her house. She listened to everything silently, her face growing more serious with every word. "We have to go to someone," she said firmly. "Someone we can trust." "Who?" Keanu asked. "Everyone might be compromised. There's a journalist I know," she said after a pause. "An investigative reporter. She's exposed powerful people before. If anyone can help us bring this into the light, it's her." Keanu thought about it. Going public was risky. It could make them targets. But it was also their best chance to protect Dylan and end the threats for good. "Set up a meeting," he said finally. "But we keep Dylan out of it for now. I don't want him getting hurt." The meeting took place 2 days later in a small, quiet diner on the outskirts of the city. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, listened carefully as Keanu and Sandra laid out everything Dylan had told them. "If even half of this is true," Claire said, "it's huge. But without evidence, it's just a story. And stories alone don't bring people down. What if there is evidence?" Keanu asked. "Then we need to find it," Claire replied. "And if Dylan destroyed everything, we start by figuring out who else was involved." As they spoke, Claire pulled out a list of old company names, investors, and production records. Many were still active. Some had rebranded under new names. But one name stood out, a powerful media executive named Marcus Vance. "If anyone had a reason to silence Dylan," Claire said, pointing at the name, "it's him." Later that night, Keanu visited Dylan again and mentioned Vance's name. The reaction was instant. Dylan's face went pale. His hands trembled. "Don't go near him," Dylan whispered. "He's worse than you think." "Why?" "Because he's not just behind the money laundering. He's behind everything. The threats, the blackmail, even the accident on set." Keanu frowned. "What accident?" Dylan swallowed hard. "The one that killed Lisa." Keanu froze. Lisa was a young stunt coordinator who had died during the filming of that same movie. The death had been ruled accidental, a harness failure during a stunt sequence. But if what Dylan was suggesting was true, it hadn't been an accident at all. They silenced her because she knew too much, Dylan said. And when I started asking questions, they came for me too. The room felt colder suddenly, the air heavy with a truth too dark to ignore. This was no longer about redemption. It was about justice, and revenge. Keanu knew they couldn't wait any longer. The next step was dangerous, but necessary. He, Sandra, and Claire would dig deeper into Marcus Vance's network. They would follow the money, track the old records, and see if they could find any trace of the evidence Dylan once had. But just as their plan was forming, the first blow struck out one evening as Keanu returned to his car after meeting Claire. He noticed something strange. The door was slightly open. His heart raced. He stepped closer, and there, taped to the steering wheel, was another note. You were warned. This is your last chance. Walk away, or you'll disappear like she did. Keanu's breath caught. They knew he was investigating. They knew about Lisa, and they were watching him. He drove home in silence, his mind spinning with possibilities. Should he tell Sandra? Should he warn Dylan? Should they go to the police after all? But deep down, he already knew the answer. They were too far in to stop now. If they walked away, Dylan would remain a broken man. Lisa's death would remain a lie, and powerful people would continue to destroy lives without consequence. For the first time in a long time, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt before. Anger. Not the explosive kind, but the quiet, determined fire of a man who had decided to fight back. And as he stared out at the dark city skyline, he whispered to himself, almost as a vow, this ends with the truth. But the truth would come at a cost. Before the battle was over, secrets would be exposed, loyalties would be tested, and someone close to Keanu would betray him in a way he never saw coming. And when that betrayal arrived, it would change everything. Betrayal in the shadows. City lights blurred past as Keanu drove through the rain-soaked streets, the wipers rhythmically sweeping away the storm. But no matter how clear the windshield became, his mind remained clouded. The threats were growing bolder, the secrets darker, and every step they took toward the truth seemed to pull them deeper into a dangerous web. He had spent the entire night replaying Dylan's words over and over. The accident that wasn't an accident. The name Marcus Vance, the warning note left on his car. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Someone was watching them. Someone powerful enough to erase people, silence stories, and manipulate the system itself. And now, for the first time, Keanu felt a chill of doubt. What if they had gone too far? What if this wasn't a fight they could win? But then he remembered Dylan's broken eyes, Lisa's unspoken story, and the weight of silence that had buried the truth for so many years. No, they couldn't stop now. The next day, Keanu met Sandra and Claire in a quiet bookshop cafe, their unofficial headquarters since the investigation had begun. Sandra was already there, scrolling through documents on her tablet, her face etched with determination. Claire arrived moments later, carrying a folder thick with new information. I dug deeper into Vance's companies, Claire said, spreading the papers across the table. He's funneled millions into shell corporations over the last decade. Most of them are linked to offshore accounts. Some of them even fund small production projects, fronts to move money. Can we trace any of it back to Lisa? Keanu asked. Not yet, Claire admitted. But there's one payment, large, unaccounted for, made 2 days before her death. It went to a stunt coordination subcontractor that doesn't exist on paper, which means someone paid to make sure she never talked, Sandra said quietly. Exactly. Keanu stared at the name on the paper, his chest tightening. It wasn't just about money. It was about murder, and the deeper they dug, the more dangerous this became. We need evidence. Claire continued. Documents, recordings, anything that connects Vance to this. If we don't get something solid, we're just telling stories. Dylan said he destroyed everything. Keanu said, but maybe he missed something, or maybe someone else kept a copy, Claire suggested. People like Vance don't trust each other. If there was evidence once, someone else might still have it. Later that night, Keanu and Sandra visited Dylan in the small shelter where he was now staying. The transformation in him was slow but visible. His beard was trimmed, his eyes clearer, his posture stronger. But when they told him about the payment and the subcontractor, his expression changed instantly. I know that name, Dylan whispered. It was a fake company we used during the shoot. But there's more. There was a backup server. I set it up myself. I thought I deleted everything, but if the server still exists, where is it? Keanu asked. Dylan hesitated. In the storage facility near the old studio. But if it's still there, they'll be watching it. They'll know if someone tries to access it. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance. The risk was high, but the potential reward was higher. If that server held even one file, an email, a payment trail, a recording, it could bring everything down. Then we go at night, Keanu said, quietly. No attention. 2 nights later, under the cover of darkness, they approached the abandoned storage facility. The air was heavy and still, the only sound the hum of distant traffic. Keanu led the way with a flashlight, Sandra following close behind. Dylan, despite his protests, insisted on coming. This was his past, and he needed to face it. The inside was dusty and cold. Rows of forgotten props and equipment stacked like memories of a forgotten era. They navigated through the maze until they reached a locked door marked server room. Dylan pulled a set of old keys from his pocket and unlocked it. The room smelled of stale air and electricity. In the corner sat a dusty, outdated server unit. Dylan approached it carefully, his hands trembling. If it still works, he murmured. Everything we need is in here. But just as he reached for the power switch, the lights above them flickered, once, twice, then went out. What happened? Sandra whispered. Someone cut the power, Keanu said, his voice steady but tense. And then, from the darkness, footsteps, slow, deliberate, in closer. A tall man stepped into the faint beam of Keanu's flashlight. His suit was immaculate, his expression cold and controlled. I was wondering how long it would take for you to find this place, he said calmly. Double quotes Marcus Vance. Dylan breathed, his face draining of color. You should have stayed buried, Dylan, Vance said, his voice smooth as glass. But then again, you were never good at knowing when to quit. Keanu stepped forward, placing himself between Vance and the others. It's over. We know what you did, do you? Vance smiled faintly. Because from where I'm standing, all I see is a disgraced ex-assistant, a washed-up journalist, a fading actress, and a man with too much curiosity. And not one of you has a shred of proof. We will. Claire's voice cut through the silence. Keanu turned in surprise. She was standing by the door, a small camera hidden in her jacket. And now we have you on record. For the first time, Vance's smile faltered. But then something unexpected happened. Another voice echoed from behind them. Turn it off, Claire. Keanu spun around, his stomach sinking. Sandra was standing beside Claire, but her eyes weren't filled with fear or determination. They were filled with regret. Sandra, Keanu whispered. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I had no choice. Vance stepped forward, smiling again. Of course she didn't. People like me don't just make threats, we keep promises. And I promised her that if she cooperated, no one would get hurt. Keanu's world tilted. Betrayal. From the one person he trusted most. What did you do? He asked, his voice trembling. They threatened my family, Sandra whispered. My sister, my nephew. They said they'd ruin them. I couldn't let that happen. So you sold us out? Dylan shouted. After everything? I didn't tell them everything, Sandra said desperately. I just told them about tonight. I thought maybe we could still fix this, but it was too late. Vance's men stepped out of the shadows, surrounding them. The air was thick with tension, fear, and betrayal. This is the part where you disappear, Vance said softly. They were forced out of the building and into waiting cars. Their phones were taken, their hands bound. Keanu kept his eyes on Sandra, who sat silently, tears streaming down her face. Part of him wanted to hate her. Another part understood. Fear made people do desperate things, but one thing was certain, everything had changed. The investigation was compromised, their lives were in danger, and the people they were trying to expose now had the upper hand. And yet, even in that dark moment, a fire burned inside Keanu. They might have been betrayed, they might have been captured, but the truth was still out there, and he wasn't giving up. As the car sped into the night, he made a silent vow, no matter what it takes. He whispered to himself, we finished this, but the cost of finishing it would be higher than any of them could imagine, because the next move Vance made wouldn't just threaten their mission, it would threaten their lives, and before it was over, one of them would pay the ultimate price. The darkness before dawn night was cold and silent. As the car drove through the deserted industrial district, the rain had stopped. leaving behind slick streets that reflected the dim orange glow of streetlights. Keanu sat between two men in dark suits, his wrists bound with plastic ties, his mind racing. Across from him, Sandra stared at the floor, her face pale with guilt. Dylan was beside her, trembling, not from fear, but from anger so deep it made his whole body shake. They were being taken somewhere, but none of them knew where, and that uncertainty was more terrifying than anything else. How much farther? One of the men asked the driver. 15 minutes, came the reply. 15 minutes. That was all the time they had before whatever awaited them. Keanu knew that once they arrived, they might never get another chance to fight back. He glanced at Sandra, who finally looked up and met his eyes. There was so much unspoken between them, betrayal, pain, regret, but above all, there was still something deeper, trust. Despite everything, he could see it in her eyes. She wanted to make it right. "We're not done," Keanu whispered under his breath. "What?" Sandra asked softly. "Whatever happens next," he said, leaning closer. "We don't give up." She nodded, tears threatening to fall. The car finally stopped outside a large, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Heavy metal doors creaked open as they were dragged inside. The place smelled of oil and rust, and somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily from a broken pipe. Marcus Vance was waiting for them. He stood near an old table covered in documents, his calm smile as chilling as ever. "Welcome," he said. "I wish we could have met under better circumstances. You don't have to do this," Keanu said, his voice firm. "It's not too late to stop." "Oh, but I do," Vance replied, walking slowly toward him. "You see, people like me don't survive by being merciful. We survive by being thorough, and that means removing problems before they become threats. So that's it." Dylan spat. "You destroy anyone who tells the truth?" "Not anyone," Vance said. "Just the ones who matter." He turned to Sandra. "And as for you, you did well, but I'm afraid your usefulness has expired." Sandra's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "You see, betrayal is a double-edged sword," Vance continued. "If you're willing to betray them, how can I be sure you won't betray me next?" He snapped his fingers, and one of the men grabbed her roughly. Keanu's chest exploded with panic. "Don't touch her," he shouted, struggling against his restraints. But the man didn't stop. He dragged Sandra toward the back of the warehouse, where a dark stairwell led down into the unknown. "Where are you taking her?" Keanu demanded. "Somewhere safe," Vance said calmly. For now, time passed slowly in that dim, echoing space. They were left in a corner, watched by the armed guards, while Vance disappeared into an office upstairs. Keanu's wrists ached from the tight plastic ties, but his mind refused to surrender. "We have to get out," Dylan whispered. "I know," Keanu replied. "But how?" Dylan's eyes darted around the room, scanning for anything useful. Then he noticed a piece of broken metal near a stack of crates. If he could reach it, maybe he could cut through the ties, distract them, Dylan whispered. "Just for a minute." Keanu nodded. He shifted slightly, then raised his voice. "Hey," he called to the guards. "You think this is going to stop us? You have no idea who you're working for." One guard laughed. "Save your breath, Hollywood. You're just pawns," Keanu continued. "Vance will throw you away the second you're no longer useful. Just like he did to Sandra." The guard frowned, stepping closer. "Watch your mouth." It was enough. While the guard's attention was on Keanu, Dylan wriggled toward the piece of metal and began sawing at the ties. It was slow, painful work, but after several tense minutes, the plastic finally snapped. He quickly freed Keanu, and together they silently loosened Claire's restraints. The three exchanged a look. This was their only chance. They waited until one of the guards turned his back. Then Keanu moved. With a burst of strength, he tackled the nearest man, slamming him to the ground. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Dylan swung the broken metal rod, knocking it from his hand. Claire grabbed the gun and pointed it at them. "Don't move," she said, her voice shaking. Within moments, they had both guards tied up and unconscious. Keanu's heart pounded as he looked toward the stairwell. "We have to find Sandra," he said. They moved quickly, descending into the basement. The air grew colder as they went deeper, and the faint hum of machinery echoed around them. Finally, they reached a locked door. Keanu kicked it open, and what they saw inside froze them where they stood. Sandra was sitting on the floor, her wrists bound, her face bruised but alive. But she wasn't alone. Two more armed men stood nearby, and they had been waiting. "Drop it," one of them barked. Claire hesitated, the gun shaking in her hands. Keanu stepped forward, placing himself between the guards and the others. "If you're going to shoot someone," he said calmly, "shoot me." "Keanu, no," Sandra cried. But the men didn't shoot. Instead, one of them smirked and pressed a button on a small remote in his hand. Above them, a series of mechanical clicks echoed through the building, and then a timer began to beep. "What did you do?" Dylan shouted. "Insurance," the man replied. 5 minutes. After that, this whole place goes up. Panic surged through them. They had 5 minutes to escape, 5 minutes to survive. Keanu lunged at the nearest guard, and chaos erupted. Claire fired a warning shot. Dylan tackled the second man, and Sandra kicked her way free from the ropes. They fought desperately, adrenaline fueling every movement. Within moments, the 2 men were down, but the timer kept ticking. "We have to go," Claire shouted. "Not yet," Keanu said, rushing to the table in the corner. There, among stacks of files and hard drives, was something he hadn't expected. Folders marked with company names, transaction histories, and email transcripts. It was the evidence they had been searching for. "This is it," Keanu breathed. "This is everything. We don't have time." Sandra cried. "We can't leave it," he said firmly, stuffing the files into a bag. "This is how we end this." They ran. Up the stairs, through the warehouse, and out into the night as the timer counted down. 30 seconds. 20. 10. They'd up behind an old delivery truck just as the explosion ripped through the building, sending a wave of fire and debris into the sky. The force knocked them to the ground, but they were alive. Bruised, burned, shaken, but alive. For a long time, none of them spoke. They just lay there, breathing hard, watching the flames consume the warehouse and everything inside. "We did it," Claire whispered. "We actually did it." Keanu looked at Sandra, who was crying silently. He reached for her hand and held it. "It's not over," he said softly. "But now we have a chance." But their fight was far from finished. The evidence they had recovered was powerful, enough to bring Marcus Vance and his empire to its knees. But it also painted a target on their backs, and as the first sirens wailed in the distance, none of them realized that Vance wasn't done. He was still out there, and he was preparing one final move, one that would break their hearts, before the truth could set them free. The final reckoning sun was rising over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, but to Keanu and the others, it felt like the darkest morning of their lives. The explosion the night before had made the news. Authorities believed it was a gas leak in an abandoned warehouse. No one suspected the truth, that inside those burning walls, the greatest secret of a corrupt empire had nearly been lost forever. But it wasn't lost. In a small, dimly lit apartment on the edge of the city, Keanu, Sandra, Dylan, and Claire sat around a table covered with files, hard drives, and evidence that could change everything. "This is enough to bring Vance down," Claire said, scrolling through the email she had just decrypted. Payments to shell companies, orders to silence whistleblowers, even messages that prove Lisa's death wasn't an accident. "It's all here. Then we go public," Dylan said. "We hand everything to the press, the police, whoever will listen. It's not that simple," Claire replied. "If we release it the wrong way, they'll bury it. They'll discredit the source. They'll say Dylan faked it all. So what do we do?" Sandra asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We need to go to someone untouchable," Claire said. "Someone who can't be bought or silenced." Keanu thought for a moment, then nodded. "I know someone." 2 days later, they walked into the office of a federal prosecutor known for taking down some of the most powerful people in the country. Her name was Elena Ramos, relentless, incorruptible, and feared by every executive with skeletons in their closet. "Mr. Reeves," she said, shaking his hand. "This is unexpected." "Believe me," Keanu replied, placing the files on her desk. "We didn't plan for any of this." Over the next 2 hours, they laid everything out. The corruption, the threats, the accident, the betrayal. Elena listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes scanning every page. When they were done, she leaned back in her chair, silent for a long moment. "This is explosive," she said finally. "If it's real, it could take down half the industry. It's real," Dylan said firmly. "I lived it. Then I'll open a federal investigation," Elena said. "But you need to understand, once we do this, there's no going back. Your names will be in the news. Your lives will change, and they will fight back. We're ready," Keanu said quietly. Elena nodded. Then let's bring them down. The investigation began within days. Subpoenas were issued, accounts were frozen, and arrest warrants prepared. The media exploded with the story, a decades-long web of corruption, fraud, and cover-ups involving some of the most powerful names in Hollywood. And at the center of it all, Marcus Vance. Vance tried to fight back, of course. His lawyers attacked Dylan's credibility. His spokespeople called it a smear campaign, and anonymous sources flooded the press with lies. But the evidence was overwhelming. One by one, his allies abandoned him. One by one, the walls closed in. But Vance wasn't finished. He had one final card to play. It was personal. One evening, just days before his scheduled arrest, Keanu received a message on his phone. It was a photo of Sandra, bound and blindfolded in an unfamiliar room. Beneath it, a single sentence, "Come alone, or she dies." Keanu's blood ran cold. He immediately tried calling Sandra, but there was no answer. Claire and Dylan were in shock, but Keanu's face remained calm. "We're calling the police." Claire said. "No," Keanu said firmly. "If we do, they'll kill her before they even arrive." "Then what?" Dylan asked. "You can't walk into a trap." "I have to," Keanu said. "I won't lose her." He followed the instructions to an abandoned film studio on the outskirts of the city. The place was silent and dark, filled with memories of stories once told, a fitted stage for the final act of their own. Vance was waiting. "You're a hard man to break," he said, stepping out of the shadows. "But everyone breaks eventually. Where is she?" Keanu demanded. "Safe? For now." Vance smiled coldly. "Give me the evidence, and she walks out alive." "It's already with the feds," Keanu lied. "You're done." Vance's smile faded. "Then she dies." He signaled to one of his men, who dragged Sandra into the room. She was bruised but conscious, her eyes widening when she saw Keanu. "I told you not to come," she whispered, "and I told you." He replied softly. "I'm not leaving you." Everything happened in seconds. Vance's man raised his gun, and Keanu lunged. The two struggled, the weapon firing wildly and shattering a nearby window. Sandra kicked another guard, grabbing a piece of metal to free her wrists. Chaos erupted as sirens wailed outside. Claire had followed Keanu and called the authorities after all. Within minutes, federal agents stormed the studio. Vance tried to run, but it was too late. He was tackled, handcuffed, and dragged away, shouting threats that no one would ever hear again. Keanu knelt beside Sandra, holding her shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" "Just scared," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought I'd never see you again." "You're safe now," he said softly. "It's over." Weeks passed. Trials began. Headlines dominated the news. Marcus Vance was charged with conspiracy, money laundering, fraud, and multiple counts of manslaughter. Dozens of others were implicated. The industry that had hidden behind glamour and power was forced to face its darkest truths. But beyond the headlines, something deeper had changed. Dylan, once a broken man living in the shadows, testified bravely in court, his voice steady as he spoke the truth. Claire's article shook the nation and won awards. And Sandra, though haunted by the choices she had made, found forgiveness, both from others and from herself. As for Keanu, he chose to step away from the spotlight for a while. Fame had given him a platform, but this experience had reminded him of something more important: the power of kindness, the courage to fight for what's right, and the strength it takes to forgive even when the wounds run deep. Months later, the four of them met again, this time in a small diner overlooking the ocean. The air was warm, the waves gentle, and for the first time in a long time, there was peace. 2 second chances, Claire said, raising her glass, and to the people who never gave up on us, Dylan added. Keanu smiled, looking at Sandra, and to the ones who make us believe in forgiveness. She smiled back, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you for not walking away. Thank you for coming back," he whispered. They clinked their glasses and watched the sunset, knowing their lives would never be the same, but also knowing they were stronger, braver, and closer because of what they had endured together. And as the last light of day faded into night, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not the fleeting kind, but the deep, unshakable hope that no matter how dark the past is, the future is always worth fighting for.